Welcome to the ARC Web3 Unpacked podcast with me, Rich Pasqua, and Matt Sky, our host.
Hey there.
And we are very excited to have David Berkowitz here with us today to join in the discussion. David is a marketing and communications expert and a thought leader who's been riding many waves over the years, much like the rest of us. He also runs a wildly popular website and email newsletter called Serial Marketer. He's an avid speaker at global events, and his latest venture, I should say, is him spinning up the CMO coin, which we're going to dive into in a little bit. We're happy to have you here, and let's get started.
Yeah. David, if you can just maybe get us going, tell us about your background in marketing. How did you get into blockchain, Web3? What's the appeal?
Yeah, well, I've been in digital media and marketing for more than 20 years. I fell into the field, so I'm not one of those kids who grows up thinking, wow, I want to be a marketer when I grow up. I got to say, I did have this sense of, I think first around middle school, that whatever job I'd wind up in hadn't been invented yet. And when I had what for me felt like a real turning point when I helped found the emerging media team at the agency 360i, and this was about 15, 16 years ago now, then I was like, okay, well, that's one of those rare predictions that came true, and it was like some epiphany that from quite a while back. And so, and a lot of my career as a writer, as a strategist, as a marketer has been trying to make sense of things for marketers who also have way more experience than I do and who go incredibly deep in their fields, but they need someone to work with them and help figure all this out, often through experiential learning. And so as I rode a number of waves through social and mobile and Internet of Things and the maker movement and all of these things that came up along the way, then not too surprisingly, I wound up finding Web3 fascinating before just about anyone was calling it Web3. And one of those handful of things that I am pretty proud about is that for the trade publication Ad Age, I wrote the first bylined submission mentioning blockchain, and I remember searching for the word on their site when I was about to write the article. I'm like, has anyone covered this before? And I want to make sure I have an original article. And like, oh, no one's written a column that, like, it came up in a couple of smaller articles. So I've spent a chunk over the past 10 years just trying to help marketers figure this out, trying to go and talk with others who can help me figure this out, because I've had a sense that blockchain and crypto and all these things were a big deal, but still, to this day, one of the things that's consistent is that it's not always clear what and why and for whom.
I think those seem to be the big questions, that the confusion on what it is exactly. And that's interesting. You almost helped coin the term Web3, at least sort of.
Well, not. I don't want to go that far with it, but to be enough of an early adopter, and I think that the article was something like 27 ways marketers or advertisers can use blockchain, and I just came up with this list, and some of them are admittedly terrible, and I'm sure even laughable now, but there were a few people who did respond to that and be like what's even talking about? People who really knew this space, and most who saw it who didn't know what was going on at all thought it was even worse. But it's been fun to have roles where I can share these thoughts that are like far enough the way along so that I can get in touch with others who are trying to make waves, and people like yourselves who are also just committed to making sense of this and figuring out what to do with it and helping your clients with it, and then actually doing something about it.
It's funny, David. You bring up the idea of kind of you don't even know if it's right or wrong just yet because there is no playbook, and we're all flying by the seat of our pants a little bit and using the tools we've got and we've developed over many years in marketing and design and technology. But there are no playbooks just yet, and that brings us to another thought about you jumping into new spaces, because I share that sentiment. I always was riding the edge of what's next, right? And now it's Web3. How are you currently using Web3? Maybe get into a little bit of your CMO token and how you're marketing it and what it's all about.
Well, I had an opportunity about a year and a half ago where Jeremiah Ouyang, so it's an amazing analyst and consultant practitioner in the space, and someone who I've been learning from ever since I first spoke at an event with him in 2006, and I was following him well before that. But he IM'd me one day and he said, how would you like to have a David coin? I'm like, ooh, that sounds cool as hell. And I remember when I'm embarrassed that I can't even pronounce everything in Web3, like the Doge coin.
I think that's correct. I think it's Doge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that
pretty good?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So that's why I need to just keep talking to others in space to get my pronunciation right. But ever since then, I was like, oh, is it possible to have an initial coin offering? And I was like, not quite that easy to do so, because it turned out you needed a decent amount of investment to go and go through that whole process. But as soon as he said that to me, I was like, well, one thing I've been pretty good at over the course of my career is that even when I wind up in some public-facing roles, I don't want anything to be a vanity project, and I try. Like if I'm doing anything on my own, it's like then I'm just inclined to be more self-deprecating about it, but not to be this I'm at the center of everything. And that was true in building a community over the past 4 years. So as soon as he said that to me, I was like, well, there's some to this. I love the idea. I've got this community of a few thousand marketers, serial marketers. How do we make it something that could be more useful for them and something way bigger than just a David coin? And so fittingly, I asked the community one day, I said, so if we were going to have a ticker symbol for our community, and I wasn't explaining what this was and didn't give them any of the context of the platform I was talking to Jeremiah about, no real background on it. So just thought experiment here, 3 to 5 letter ticket symbol. What would you do? And there's some great ideas that came through, and some of them like different plays on the word marketer or advertiser. And then someone said something about like KPIs and CTR for click-through rates, and was like, oh, wait a second, like I didn't really look up marketing acronyms yet, and so I Googled marketing acronyms. CMO comes up first, and I am Jeremiah, and I was like, this is it. Like, we're going to launch the CMO coin. So he was working with this platform, Rally.io. I got to be one of the first 50 or so creators on this platform, and he's like, are you sure? I'm like as soon as I saw it, I heard it, and I even actually gave some of the first CMO coins to the community member who came up with the idea that most closely inspired it. So, and so it gave it gave me access to this economy for community, which is really different because now there are ways to go and involve people and reward people, incentivize community members in a way that feels more like having a stake in the community rather than something that feels purely transactional. And there's also something that this really just builds on a lot of social psychology, and you think about like Daniel Kahneman style research that like once you abstract the mechanism of payment a little bit, then because the value becomes a little murkier, it can actually feel far more rewarding to say, regardless of if the CMO coin is $1 on one day or $10 another, just having some literal token of appreciation can matter far more, and that'll matter far more than like trying to offer a $5 or $10 Starbucks gift card, something like that will actually feel like it cheapens the experience. So then it's like, what do we do with that, right? And that's just enabled a lot of experimentation. It's enabled, say, bounties for participating in research, and enabled things like rewarding people for certain kinds of social interactions. Some members have experimented with selling services through CMO coins and being part of that economy themselves. And so suddenly there's just far more possibility when it's not just cash transactions, but still having some layer of exchange that feels branded for the community itself.
So it's less about hey, the CMO coin will be $10 in a year, or $100 or $200, and it's more about giving people a stake in the community through equity. And ultimately what you're offering them is utility or services, really, at the end of the day. And that is true value. Nice.
Yeah. And this is where a lot of it's starting, because yes, like it's, one of those funny things is with Web3 in general is that it's easier to get people excited about it when they see the price going up than if the price is going down. And that's regardless of where it actually starts. So even a starting coin price that's too high can set irrational expectations for it. So people are going to care, right? Like people will still check the price of CMO, or the price of the Rally token, the price of Bitcoin, ETH, and anything out there. And so, sort of like what we see on the macro level. It's like, Biden has a string of defeats. He can't get any bill passed. Inflation's going up. Gas prices are going up. Everyone thinks he's like in the bottom 5 as far as like the worst presidents ever, right? Like the left hates him, the right hates him. Now, gas prices are going down. Bills passed to get inflation going down. Unemployment's record low levels, all this stuff. And now, like again, a matter of weeks, Biden's somehow one of the most effective presidents ever, right? And so there is that zeitgeist that comes with it. And now it's like, well, people want to get on that bandwagon. So it does take a lot of restraint in general. And so this is like me and my CMO microcosm, but this is marketers and consumers writ large of how do you not make this a bandwagon play? How do you make this a play of like, what is this actually good for? And can you do something meaningful with it?
Yeah, I think that's the challenge is, retaining people in these new environments that we're creating, whether it be Discord or CMO tokens or anything else like that, capturing their imaginations. And much like you said, David, it's easy to kind of get people excited, but how do you keep them engaged, right? And that is the $1 million question for any marketer or advertiser. Yeah, that's great.
What are examples of
Matt,
the kind of engagement you're saying? Just curious.
So in terms of like the kinds of things that will get people to take notice about, I'd say one of the most useful things that we wound up having in the community is a private group. So a lot of the day-to-day communities in Slack, we're not as fully Web3 and like all in with Discord as is the case for I think most tech-related communities that are launching today. And so in Slack, we have this CMO Coin Advisors group with a monthly call where we're bouncing around ideas for how do we use this? How can we what do we actually do about it, and how do we learn from each other on this? So, for instance, there's a company called Thece, THECE, where they wound up helping bring to life the first ever upfronts for gaming, and so they worked with the IAB, the Interactive Ad Bureau, on this, and as part of this, then for teams that participated in these gaming upfronts, and there was a real interactive layer, so it wasn't just about how much people are spending. There were actually there was a gaming tournament as part of it, and so then they minted a certain custom edition CMO coin as the inaugural for the inaugural event's participants, and now they've got this keepsake of a token. There's still this question of what do you then do with that going forward, but it's like it gave all of us a way for this to market the community to these gaming participants and to the IAB itself, but then it also allowed Thece and the IAB to just go and extend the shelf life of this brief event that they were doing, and so now there's something that they can even just follow up with these participants and coin holders, and then it starts getting really interesting as far as what does year 2 and 3 and 4 look like, and so it's just taken a lot of that building, right? Like we're thinking about this as a much longer marketing program, not a one-off campaign. And I think that's one of the most important things to look out for in terms of marketers' embrace of Web3. It's like, are they trying to do a one-off stunt? Is this like, here's our one shot at this? Or is this something that's that's one tactic as part of an actual strategy?
Mm. You also, David, you brought something up earlier in that piece. As far as communities go, as marketers, we're so used to kind of speaking to communities, right, and setting up communities, but then speaking at them. But in reality, when we set up like a marketing one, or even with ARC, we're setting up one, it's not just to invite people into our community, or, hey, get the ARC token, or whatever it may be, or white papers, or whatever we're doing or publishing. It's to get feedback, right? And it takes a village, right? And that feedback is invaluable. And where we're getting feedback is from marketing folks like yourselves, technologists and innovators, software engineers, designers, game designers, metaverse. These are all environments that we're going to be learning from no matter what you do for a living.
And there are opportunities like that. And I'm not just speaking for myself here, because one of the things that's most exciting for me, when you wind up taking part in some new kind of media, then one of the things that I've just been so appreciative of time and time again, and it's true for blogs or newsletters, or for those who are podcasting and video casting, areas like that I haven't really been a creator in that sense. And it's definitely true as far as being a community manager and now a coin originator, is that it gets you access to all these peers who are working on similar challenges. So it's like this ticket into a club, right? In the case of Clubhouse, as that was a thing for a while, it literally was a Clubhouse club. And so so there's just this great way to learn from each other. And so if there is a community where you have some kind of token associated with it, then I think a lot of community organizers are just so eager to do more with that. Like if someone came to me and said, we want to get some feedback for your from your community, and we'll incentivize the first 100 people to give a response with 5 CMO coins. My gut on this is I just want to make that a pass-through cost, right? Like, so just put those 500 CMO coins in escrow, and then I'll distribute them. I'll say, this is thanks to brand X that is doing this. Like, let's just get people using this. Let's get those insights to the marketer, and then we're just all, we win because we're learning what works. And maybe I find out that only 5 people wanted to participate that way. Maybe I find out that there was a waiting list of 500 people who would have participated if only the study was funded more, right? Like, so there are things like that I think right now are just like, there are ways to work with creators, sort of like in early days of influencer marketing, right? Like the first time a brand reached out to most Instagram influencers, they weren't charging a thing, right. So like before, to use one example of a really strong community there, like before mommy bloggers figured out how much their Instagram accounts, how much their Tumblrs and blogs were worth, like they were just psyched to hear from a brand and get that kind of notice. And now I think we're having that point now with a lot of these community organizers with like creator coins. It's just like let's just do something cool. Later on, this goes really well. Okay, figure out the economics later. But like, let's just do more. Let's just learn more. And so those who are ready to just have those conversations and get into a little bit of a weird area, there are terrific opportunities right now.
Yeah. It's important to realize it. To your point, we're creating the inroads to this. We're creating the highways now. There are no points of contact that are cemented and cemented, I should say. It's very interesting for sure.
Curious, just zooming out a little bit. I think a lot of people who are listening to this may be thinking, okay, well, how do I jump in, right? We're always saying jump in. So David, what kind of advice would you give people who are saying they want to get into Web3? They're looking at it. It's pretty intimidating in the beginning for a lot of people.
Yeah, well, some of it is just trying to see who are the folks who are talking about this in a remotely interesting way, right? Like what are you, go in your trade of choice. It could be women's wear daily if you're in the retail space, right? It could be something that's focused on a specific vertical, but who's out there just trying to like the good news is I'm not alone, right? You're not alone, Rich, Matt. Like,
right.
We're there are quite a number of us out there. So it's like anyone who reached out to any of the three of us, like we're probably going to pick up the phone and try to have a conversation, and it doesn't have to have some some direct endpoint there. But again, like through my network, for instance, of some of these other coin creators, let alone members of the community who are specifically interested in Web3, I'd love to throw stuff their way, right? Like there's a person who's designed all the NFT tokens or any of the good ones, at least for serial marketers. I did a terrible one in PowerPoint myself that I take all the blame for, but she knows it, and she so
you have the classic keywords case, coming in, the sliding with the typewriter effect. You gotta love that.
It's the worst with clip art and everything.
I love it.
But it served its purpose for a kind of Super Bowl pool that I was trying to hack together using tokens as the ticket to get you a bid for one of the scores in the boxes. So if I can funnel more people to Miriam Reza, who's this incredible artist and also just student of the NFT space who has an amazing track record of what she's done, like again, just anyone who wants to reach out to me or anyone who's out there talk about this stuff, like we probably have network and know some good starting points. And so much of it is just like once you start trying to take an interest, right? Like reading CoinDesk. CoinDesk does a really surprising job actually covering brands in Web3, and so I tend to see better coverage of brands in Web3 from CoinDesk than I do in the ad trades. And
right.
So great. Then like this is where I'm getting my information. And you know what? I ignore the 90% of stuff in terms of what coins are rising and falling.
Right. Now, David, with Matt and I have been having some discussions, and it's bubbled up in some of our previous podcasts, of the idea of failing in public, right? So we've talked about protocols. We've talked about major protocols hitting bottom and literally grounding out, people losing their shirts on certain things from an investment standpoint. From a software side of things, we are seeing, because we are playing on the world's computer, if you will, software companies failing, right? How can marketers comfortably take chances in this space and mitigate the risks for their brand and everything else they're doing from a marketing standpoint?
Well, a lot of it's being comfortable that there's that there are a couple different kinds of risk. So there are security risks where you have to protect your customers. If you're doing something, say in the NFT space and distributing tokens, then talking to those partners and tech and service providers and say let's say our customers spend $1,000 or $100,000 on some of these NFTs, right? Like there are, and some of these token prices get well into the six figures here, even on the brand side. Then you want to make sure that what's the worst that can happen, and can you make sure that it doesn't become some PR disaster? So at least, and now the good news is anyone who's joined at this point has seen examples of a lot of the worst that can happen, because unfortunately it seems to be this ongoing trope right now, and a lot of the companies that weren't protecting security the right way either have to pivot quickly or are no longer with us. But then there's the other side of it, and it's more like the emotional side of it, right? Like I'll speak on a personal level as someone who went through that cliche of a COVID era divorce. Now, I had to get used to the idea that at first going into this, it was, wait a second, like everyone's going to think I had a failure of marriage. It's like, no, it was actually worth it while it lasted. And now it's a chance to find another stab at something that works for each of us in a different way. But getting that out of my head, it takes a lot of work, right? So that emotional side of it, I just want to say you can't discount it. Yeah, it's really it's important, but it's also important to realize that most of that is going to be in your head and not in the eyes of the public. There are always people, as soon as you do anything remotely public, it's like, yes, there's going to be snark on Twitter. There's going to be stupid comments popping up places. That's anywhere and everywhere. That's like the cost of living digitally. But I think that most people, especially right now, when you're doing something that's remotely on that cutting edge, where that's remotely something that someone in your category, someone that's a brand that's remotely like yours hasn't done before, and that's most of Web3 right now, then if people are going to notice it, then people are going to accept that maybe this isn't going to work, and that there's going to be a lot more of that longer term excitement that, oh, this is a brand that tried setting up a token economy. This is a brand that tried to gate content in some way. This is a brand that tried to to use Web3 to bridge online and offline. And maybe the first stab at it, there were 5 people who did it, and the next stab at it, there were 500. When I was at 360i, we helped H&R Block get on Twitter in time for the 2009 tax season. They were one of the first brands on Twitter. They had about 500 followers. One of them was then one of the biggest tech influencers, Robert Scoble, and he was tweeting about them. He was writing about them in Fast Company. He couldn't have been more excited. So it was like you think now, like, oh, you had 500 people for a major national brand on Twitter, and now it's like, no, now they can tell people that they've been doing this for about 15 years and they've been on the cutting edge. And so, long term, it's more that they had that earlier runway to learn from and build on, and it's not about what were their hits and misses with their first attempts.
Would you also say that companies get a little more credit than they think they do in terms of people's short attention spans? They're not going to remember the failures as much as long as you're making headway?
Yeah, there's some degree of that, and I think that this also, that some of it is what are your goals right now. So if you're trying to get attention, there's also a lot of ways to do so, especially if you're doing something that hasn't been done before. But if you want to be more of a follower, whether a faster, even somewhat slower follower, like, that's okay too. That could be very intentional to go and at least plan to delay the game a little bit, plan to say, you know what, we want to do something a little bit more like what someone else has done. Look like the 50th or the 100th brand to set up an island in Roblox. Like, it might not get the same attention as what Nike does at first or what Spotify does at first, but then they do have something resembling the start of a playbook to build on. They got a little bit more of a sense of, is this target audience, right? They could actually spend time, hopefully they're spending a lot of time in Roblox, whether they thought they would ever do that, whether or not they have kids living at home with them, and actually seeing, who are these people? What are they saying? What are they doing? And now you can ask those questions. And that's great too, because then you can skip ahead to not just, will Ad Age pick this up, but like, what's the actual value we're getting out of it from being in this place where ideally their target audience and their families are.
I want to rewind on one last point. I'm just so curious. You're using sort of the divorce analogy, and I think there's something that a lot of brands, they come to love their own brands so much. And Rich, you and I talk about this a lot, about brands needing to get out of their own way, almost needing to detach a little bit and being willing to move to the next thing. I guess both from David and Rich, I just would love to hear your thoughts in terms of how brands can become more comfortable getting out of their own way to get to the next phase, to not cling to previous campaigns or what did or didn't work, but rather just venture into the unknown, which is Web3, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'll just jump in and say, there is risk of dinging your reputation or your messaging or whatnot. But as David was, pointing out, you kind of have to start to dip your toes into this, and you have to play in this world, and you can in a very safe way. But a lot of it is a little bit risky, and you have to be able to say and let yourself go, or your brand go a little bit, and say, the dynamics are changing here, right? Our customers are no longer who we thought they were, and we now truly are a service to the end users. I think the narrative is changing. It will change quite a bit, and brands will have to adopt it. And how hard you hit the gas in that world, is up to you. I mean, we're seeing really interesting things, like with Tiffany's. I call it brand dating. I love it. Tiffany's and CryptoPunks getting together to do some kind of cool physical and digital NFT experience. To me, they and Tiffany's is a pretty, I would consider, a fairly conservative brand. Obviously, they have a pretty big audience, and their brand itself is larger than life. But that was a pretty risky move, and who knows if it'll work? It might fall on its face. But it gave a lot of us a smile, and we did read the article, and it did put Tiffany's top of mind, last week when we were talking with colleagues and friends. So I think, there's tremendous value in trying.
Did you see that campaign?
Getting out there.
The Tiffany's thing?
Yeah, well, and Tiffany is a fascinating brand because actually before that campaign, when I started doing some talks this year about Web3, I would actually bring up a stunt that Tiffany did where they used coins as an April Fool's joke. So I thought that was amazing that like Ben and Jerry's and others, they were talking about Web3 as a joke, right? They were making fun of it, and great. So that was like one of the big themes this year. But then they actually did something for real. But it also brings to mind something that Tiffany did that I included in the mobile marketing playbook that I wrote for the agency 360i. And so Tiffany had one of the coolest mobile apps I'd ever seen. And I'm not sure if this is still a feature as part of it, but they had a ring sizer in it so that you could go and take one of your partner's rings and put it on the app screen and find out the ring size, and
that's super useful.
I
wow.
remember the process of trying to do this when I was getting engaged, and it took a lot of surreptitious effort to go and borrow a ring and take it to a jewelry shop and get that size. So they made this like a 5-second process. So this is something where they've actually been at the tech forefront, deserve so much credit for this. Yeah, this what seems like a very traditional brand, but they're way ahead of consumer behavior, and it's fascinating to see this. However successful or not this one iteration is, right? Like they're just, it's great to see them just staying in there.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of some of the optics companies where you can try on. Well, years ago I worked on an app, I think for Sterling Optical, where you could try on different glasses and whatnot. But one of the ones that in this category that stands out to me was Bell and Ross, the watchmaker, had these big beautiful aviation style watches, and you could literally put your phone right on your wrist and see what it actually looks like against your skin color, and get a sense of how it is. And that's awesome. And that kind of brings me into a little bit more of an extension on that discussion is image versus message. When it comes to marketing and the future of marketing, how do you weave these together, right? And what's the ability to extend the brand in Web3?
Yeah, and this is also where figuring out what that kind of brand value is, because it could take a lot of different forms. In the mobile example, Tiffany went full on that utility route. Okay, so this wasn't about playing some kind of ring hunt game or something like that. This wasn't some sort of, they could have easily gone some early predecessor to Pokemon Go that others were doing with geocaching, and find some kind of things like that or around your city, and it leads you into a Tiffany store. Like other brands were doing that too, but they found this way to say if Tiffany is helping me go and if I have to download this app to go and make this process a little bit easier, then probably a few folks are going to be considering the brand more when they're going to make that purchase, and there that the time to purchase is extremely close. So it was about as perfect an execution for something that was just a really small feature like that. And so, what kind of brand image do you want to provide? What are the kinds of audiences you want to be associated with? Like, are the people you want to reach through something in Web3, are they even there yet? And then I think what's going to happen so much as the decade goes on is that all these elements that we talk about as part of that Web3 bundle right now, currencies, NFTs, these immutable ledgers, and and these just like subsets of discussions and features of Web3 that many of us agree are part of it in some way. They just kind of fade into just part of the tools that are available for marketers. One of my favorite examples of augmented reality to this day remains the first down marker on TV football games. I can't watch football without those superimposed lines, right? Like if I see some game from 30 years ago, I'd have no clue what's going on the field. So it's like it's just this digital layer superimposed over the real world, and it just makes things better. No one talks about turning on the TV once or more during a fall weekend and watching augmented reality.
Thanks for listening. This has been Web3 Unpacked with Rich Pasqua and Matt Sky, in conversation with David Berkowitz. You can learn more about David at serialmarketer.net, and you can learn more about ARC at arctai.com. Also, be sure to check us out on Discord, where the conversation continues. Thanks.